our first baby was born there. So we had a great time sitting at the mill, and we just have so many memories there, meeting students, and um, yeah. I think I lived off of the decaf coffee when I was pregnant, almost every day. um, well, let's see. First, I guess while they're hooking my keynote up, just to give a little background of myself. Let's see. So I went to school at Virginia Tech, and that's where I met the navigators, and was involved with them the first 4 years, and then spent 2 more years after graduation while I was working at Tech. I was a math major and then ended up working in the math department, and was there for 2 more years just to get more training by the navigators. And so I heard the call from God very early on, my sophomore year. And he used a retreat that I went on, kind of similar to something like this. And it was early on in that second year when I heard a workshop leader share about her story. And she was on her way to go to China. And I remember her saying this statement: "I don't care if I get laughed at, mocked at, beaten, or even killed. But what matters to me is that individuals will come to know Jesus Christ through me." I could not believe what she said. And I just started crying. I don't know what, it was something about what she said that made me, just convicted me. And I left the room and I was just walking and talking with God. God, I can't believe she says she doesn't even care if she gets killed. And then I heard that voice in my heart again. And God said, Jen, I've given you my son, but you're still living life for yourself. I want you to live life for me. And that's the day that I told the Lord, Lord, please use my life for you. And so that's when I heard it very clear. He's like, Jen, I want you to specifically invest your life in women, help women know me and my love. So, and I knew the navigators could help me, so I quit all my other clubs that I was involved with, and I went up to one of the staff and said, please train me. I need your help. And so, yeah, so I went on, went to Philippines, my first mission trip with the navigators then, and had a great time. And so soon after my 2 years after graduation, I was invited to come on staff and went off to California. And I was at UC Irvine for 9 years, and then Cal State Long Beach for 3 years. And then I met Mark, and he whisked me off my feet. So let's see. I want to show you this mug, and it says, officially off the market. So Mark gave me this mug when he proposed to me and said, you're officially off. So just wanted to show you that, you know. I'll give this to Mark so I don't break it, so you can. So here you go. But just a little background about our relationship. Let's see. So he, you know, we both went to Virginia Tech, but I'm almost 6 years older than him. And it was, you know, I always imagined that the guy who would marry me would be 2 years older than me, and he would be such high, and his personality would be this. And my friends challenged me, that's too specific. You got to be more open. Because, Jen, you can't say that. Like, it depends on the guy. I'm like, I can say whatever I want. You know, I got to marry the guy. So, but yeah, and then when he came along, he came up to me while we were both at the Glen Erie, and I was there for an EDGE conference to help run the conference, and he was there for some national, you know, leadership training. And so when he came up to me at King James dining room, and this is so typical navigator, but he came up to me and he said, hey, can I talk to you after lunch? I thought, usually by now when guys want to talk to me, they want to talk to me about their girlfriend. So, so then when he came up to me, he's like, well, I just wanted to ask you a question. Have you ever wanted to go out on a town with a young white guy? I went, young. So anyways, yeah. Uh-oh. Mark, I gave it to you so you wouldn't break it. Mark, that was a special cup. That's why I brought it. And here, can I just hold it just to say goodbye? And oh, oh, Mark. Well, I'm glad I got to show you before it broke. But you know, this mug, I'll just tell you, we just made it up. But you know, have you ever felt like this mug, just broken? And when you look at this mug and it's all in pieces, you know, there's three ways to look at it. The first way to look at it is from the perspective of judgment. And it's the other person, or it's that mug that somebody else broke. It was their mug, they dropped it, it broke. And when you look at it from that perspective, as a spectator, what are some things you think of? What if Mark was up here and he went, oh, I'm so sorry. What do you think? As a spectator, how would you feel? It's like, oh, it's embarrassing. Or it's embarrassing. One of the things I do is, quick, we got to clean that up. Like, get rid of it. Get it out of here. It's dangerous. It might hurt us. We might step on it. The other perspective that we might look at this is if it was us and we're the one that dropped it and broke it. And maybe it's us. So it's the perspective of shame. And we are the one that's in it. And if we were this mug, we would say, what am I good for now? It's embarrassing, desperate. We want help. Is there any way that this can be put together again? Can you please help me? I'm falling apart. Maybe we might push away relationships. Don't get near me. I'll end up just hurting you with my jagged edges. The other perspective that we would look at this is maybe from God. Well, I know how it feels as a spectator looking at it. I know how it would feel if I was the broken mug. But you know, God, well, how do you feel about this? So one of the things that I like to introduce some things in talking about how God feels about broken pieces is maybe the next slide. And it's a couple of things in Japan that reflects this aspect of brokenness. And it's an art called kintsugi. And kin literally means gold. And if any of you are studying Chinese characters, the first kanji is gold. And the second kanji is tsugi, and that means put together. And it's the art of taking broken pottery and putting inlay of gold along the broken spots. And then the next slide, and you have this. Beautiful. And it's more valuable than the broken pottery or even the pottery before it was broken. It's very expensive to own one of these. And there's a concept in Japan called wabi-sabi, and you might have heard it, maybe you've used it. But today you'll learn a new Japanese word, and that's wabi-sabi. It's really fun to say. It's like willy-nilly. Wabi-sabi. So you guys can go around and just say wabi-sabi. But we love this word and this aspect of Japan because it is the worldview centered on the acceptance of imperfection. It's incomplete. They fully embrace it. Wabi-sabi. Of course, there's the cherry blossom. It's adored in Japan. And one of the reasons why they love the cherry blossom is because of how temporary it is. It only lasts a month, not even a month, maybe a week. But they love it because it's so temporary, and it has its own beauty because of it. It's, so wabi-sabi, it's the opposite of valuing perfection. You purposely leave behind the scar, the well-worn. And maybe that's why, you guys have your favorite T-shirts or that favorite blanket. We have one of our staff back in Japan. Some of you guys might know him, but anyways, I won't say his name. I won't embarrass him. I would love to, though. But he came and joined us when he was single, and he's from UNL. And he had a button-down T-shirt, and that thing had like tears, and like it had a certain smell that no matter how many times you wash it, you can't get the smell out. I'm like, oh, we're gonna throw that away. He's like, don't you dare. So anyways, one day for his birthday, I bought him a button-down T-shirt from a really cool Japanese store and gave it to him. And I said, I want to give this to you for a promise. If you promise, you'll throw away your other one. And I think it worked. But we all have that favorite shirt. It's well-worn. We love it because it's well-worn. We also have that beloved coffee shop because it has the scratches on the floor and the walls. And I think that's why I just love being at the mill, because of that feeling. The other thing that I want to tell you about is in Japan, you might have heard this in 2011, so about 8 years ago, there was a huge earthquake and a tsunami that happened because the earthquake was in the ocean, in the bottom of the ocean, off the shore of Miyagi City. And it's in the northeast section of Japan. And the earthquake was a magnitude of 9. I was in Tokyo at the time, and that was probably one of the biggest in Tokyo in a long time. We had a magnitude of 7, marks out of the country. That tsunami killed and missing 20,000 people. There was one particular city named Ishinomaki, and had the biggest destruction of all the cities up along that northeast side of Japan. And there's one school in Ishinomaki, elementary school, where over 80% of the students died, were washed away. And over 90% of the faculty were washed away. And so one of the ladies named Sue Takamoto, a missionary, went up into that area to volunteer. And when she went up there, she saw hundreds and hundreds of broken pottery washed up along the shore. And she thought, oh, the destruction. But then as she walked up closer and picked up one of the pieces, she noticed, it's beautiful. I think you can bring some beauty out of this broken shard. And she thought, oh, but what if we did that? What if we made something beautiful out of these broken pieces and brought employment for some of the women who lost everything? They lost homes, they lost family members who were washed away. And so she began this project called the Nozomi Project. And it's called Nozomi because maybe through this they will find hope. And Nozomi means hope in Japanese. And so they called it Shards of Hope. The next slide, you can see some of the beautiful pieces they have started making through these broken shards. I'm wearing one. It's an earring, and it's a reminder for me that God is bringing hope through the brokenness. And I thought, isn't this like God with our brokenness? Third perspective to this, that God could bring beauty out of brokenness. When you order this jewelry, I'm not trying to sell Nozomi Project. But you can, nozomiproject.com. But when you get that, the packaging says beauty in brokenness. It's incredible how many passages you can find when you type in brokenness in the Bible. There's something about it God loves. Psalm 34:16 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted." Psalm 34:16. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Why is that? I wonder why God is close to the brokenhearted. And as you know, when we're thinking about all of this, you're going to be thinking about yourself. But you know, all the emotions that comes with brokenness, it's no different for non-believers. It's no different from the coworkers next to you. I don't know if any of you guys have part-time jobs or your dorm mates. They seem so distant in their belief from you, but the feelings are just the same. They're just unshepherded. There are 3 people that I want to tell you about, 3 friends. The first friend, the next slide, I want to tell you about my friend Pete. Well, he became a believer. He grew in his relationship with Jesus, became very passionate about him. He couldn't stop talking about him, you know. He was well known to be a leader in his community, and those in his community began to be persecuted for their belief, often threatened. And when someone spotted him to be part of this community, he flat out lied and betrayed his faith. Pete. Another friend I want to tell you about, next slide, my friend Mo. Well, when he was a baby, he was given up for adoption and was adopted into a family of very high position. He worked hard to measure up, often competing with other members in the family, but maybe often felt like he was never enough. One day he saw an attack and tried to help out, but instead he made the situation worse. And that kind of confirmed his fear and shame that he's a failure and will never measure up. Another friend, I have a friend named Samantha. And this woman, just like all of us, finally found love, that true love. And always just pitter-patter in her heart because she found the guy. She got married, but to her detriment, her marriage failed and it fell apart. She tried it again. But yet this pattern was repeated over and over and over. And she thought, I don't know, I don't think I'll ever find true love. You know, these 3 people, you wonder, what do they have in common? They're broken, they're hurting, they experienced failure. And maybe they made that failure define who they were. And yet these were the people God chose to use. I don't know if you guys picked up who they are. I try really hard to hide it. But the first one, Pete, it's Peter, one of the disciples in the Bible. Mo, Moses. Samantha, the Samaritan woman. You know, when you put those stories into our today's language, you're like, wait, I actually know a guy with similar story like him. Or, oh yes, the Samaritan woman. Well, when you think about it, actually, there's a lot of women around me like that with similar story. And actually, you know what? That's me. That's my story. And you think, you know, why did God choose to work through such broken people? Aren't they disqualified? Are they not the last people we think God would choose to use and to work through? But really, we're all broken. Here's some questions that I'd like you to ponder on, and you can just get whatever paper that you have. Um, and here's some questions that I want to ask you in the next slide. If you can answer as honestly as you can, but I'm not going to ask you to share it or to turn to your neighbor and see the answers. This will be just between you and God. First one, are you happy to be alive today? And answer yes, no, sometimes, don't know. So you can answer 1, 2, 3, or 4. Next one, are you thankful to be born the gender you are? I grew up with 3 brothers. Hated being a girl. How do they get to be stronger than me? I often competed with them. Do you like your face, your body? I think if we all were, especially for the women, the cosmetic industry would go bankrupt if we were all happy. Next question, are you glad to be born into your ethnicity? For me, just growing up in Colonial Heights, Virginia, I always thought I looked like Mark, but I wasn't. And I often hid that in shame. Do you believe that you are valued? Do you like your personality? Are you content in life? What if I had asked you guys to take that piece of paper and get in groups of 5 and share your answer? How would you guys feel? Be scary. I'd be scared. Very vulnerable. And that's how our unbelieving friends feel. They feel just like us. This is where the playing ground is leveled. It's right here. That vulnerability. I don't know if you guys know Brene Brown. She did a TED Talk on vulnerability, wrote a book on power of vulnerability. And she says, vulnerability is absolutely at the core of anxiety, fear, and shame, and difficult emotions. It is defined as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. But vulnerability is also the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. Only way to get there, you've got to go through that vulnerability. But it's not easy, this vulnerability. No one likes it. I stood up here last night to share my story. I'll tell you, I've shared 1,000 times, and I would never say no to sharing my story, because it's where God shows up and displays his splendor and his grace. He makes his grace famous through my brokenness. And if God can use it, I love sharing it. But I'll tell you, every single time, there's this fear because it's so vulnerable. But I wouldn't ever hold it back. And it doesn't make that vulnerability any easier every single time. So we fear it. We run from it. And why is that? For me, I run away from vulnerability by, I'll avoid it by, I get busy, start cleaning. I just clean like crazy. I see every detail, every dust, just go nuts. And it takes Mark to say, Jen, it's okay, you can let it go. You can let the dishes pile up, like, oh. I'll run away from it, I get busy. I'll start focusing on other people's problems. We all have ways. Let's turn to the person next to you or near you, and let's ask this question. In what ways do we run from vulnerability? In what ways do we try to avoid it? So maybe get together with the person next to you, one other or two others, and kind of think through a list. How do we avoid this? Well, let's hear some of these things you guys thought of. What are some ideas you guys had or observations? What are some ways we avoid vulnerability? Any thoughts? Or yeah. Yep. Hiding. Netflix. Man, Netflix, oh, gets me every single time. After one episode ends, 3 seconds. Like, I can't even decide in 3 seconds. So I want to turn this off and go work on what I was studying. But yeah, it just hooks you in. Binge watching. Yeah. What else? Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's too embarrassing to go there. So we don't like going there in conversation. Yeah. Else? Yeah. Denial. Yeah. Yeah. I'm good at doing that with my husband because he sees right through me. Like, no, Mark. And then we'll have an argument. Yep. Any else? Yeah. 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 Yep. Jokes. Yeah. I think that's a lot with the comedians too. Yeah. What else? Any other thoughts? Yeah, isn't it amazing? Man, just social media can just take the time, and it's so effective. It gets my mind away from the mess that I'm trying so hard to avoid looking at. God, don't make me look at that. I'm not ready to go there. Eating, perfecting, perfecting, perfecting ourselves, our schedule, our exercise, our studies. Yeah. Brene Brown also says we can look at ourselves, or once you're a parent, you can look at your child and say, I will perfect you until you are deserving of love. Or we can look at ourselves or our children and say, you are wired for suffering. You are loved. And you are loved. You are valuable. But you're wired for suffering. Oh yeah, just sports. Yeah. Any guys like love to watch ESPN for hours, the games? It's fun. My son and I, we love Smash Brothers. Man, the character Snake, oh. I'm a beast with Snake. Oh yeah. But it can help us avoid when we're trying to run. Yeah. Venting with yelling. It's just much easier to vent that way. For me, it's easier to blame others than to own up to my own mess. And one of the definition I heard about blame is just shifting your pain. Oh, it's so true. But you know, there's a story that I want to tell you in the next slide. There was a friend that I went to school with, and this friend decided to go out with me to California and to join me when I went on staff. And so we take the drive across country from Virginia to California, 3-day drive. And we were really good friends, one of my roommates. And just like any friendship, any relationship, on a 3-day drive, 24/7, you're together. At somewhere along the way, you're going to have a conflict. Not just one, but many. And I had this, I zeroed it down to just, I was an expert at this. When someone would hurt me, I was very good at put up the wall and treat them like they're dead. It was just easier than dealing with the pain and having to approach them with vulnerability. And so the pain started to come, I got hurt, I started putting up the wall, and by the time we arrived in California, her and I were the only ones that really knew each other, and we walk into this new community, don't know anybody. The campus ministry hadn't started up, the NAV ministry died down, so we were asked to restart the ministry. And for 6 months, I had treated her like she was dead. Days after days, she would come up to me begging, Jen, what's going on? Please tell me. If you would tell me, then we can work it out. And I was stone cold. Every night, I would go up to God and cry out when she wasn't looking. God, I hate myself. I can't even put down the wall that I built up. What's wrong with me? Please help me. I felt like that broken mug. I don't even know where to start. One night she goes to a church retreat, and the speaker says, eyes closed, heads bowed, you know that speech, you know. And then he says, someone in this room has a friend who shut you out. And I want to tell you, don't give up. She started bawling. She comes back and tells me the story. Jen, I was ready to pack up my bags and leave, but God told me, don't give up on you. And then that night, I went up to God, and I went to the beach. I said, God, I can't do this. You've called me to, what? I shouldn't be on staff. Why did you call me? I would have been ready to like quit and go home, but I knew if I did, I would be disobeying not the navigators, but God, because he was just so clear on that calling. And I thought, God, I can't do this. I don't get people. I can't handle them. They're just so painful. So can you and I just go hide out in the cave? Just you and me? Because I like you. I can handle you. And if it was just you and me, I would be so happy. I can't do it. They tear me apart. And then God said this to me at the beach. He said, Jen, if you love me, you gotta love what I love. And that's people. Like, dang it. Like, well, I guess you just come with a package. Okay, I will give this a try. And it was that night that God began to open up my heart, and we wrestled it out. I said, okay, I've got this pain in my heart, and I don't know how to approach it. The best way for me, God, is just to avoid her, put up the wall. It's just easier. But God, your way is too painful because you're wanting me to go up to her in vulnerability and talk to her about this? No, this is too scary. And then God said, Jen, you're putting Band-Aid on your cancer. But if you come to me, I will heal you. And then I thought, okay, all right. Yes, Lord. And I went up to her, and before this, God showed me what the cancer was. He gave me this flashback when I was 8 years old. No, I was in, 8th grade. And I was being chewed out for getting, I think, C on my report card. And I got kicked out of the house. And it was late at night. It was like 11 p.m. I didn't know where to go. And I was sitting on the swing set at my apartment complex. I thought, oh, I could run away, but that would be too scary. I don't know where to eat. Where do I live? And I remember going, man, I feel like a piece of trash that got thrown out. And I thought, and then God showed me this angry fist went up in my heart, and it said, no one and nothing's ever going to make me feel like this again, like a piece of trash, and I will punish them. And I punished my dad by that wall and treating him like his dead. And God showed me, Jen, get off that judgment seat. That's my seat. I am the judge. And that's where, for the first time, there was a repenting. I thought, God, I am so sorry. I had no idea what I was doing, that was in my heart. Will you please forgive me? And then my heart started to melt. And then I was able to go up to my friend. And she was I think she was about to have a heart attack. Like, she's coming to me, she's talking. It's like, don't ruin it, don't ruin it. And you know what? We had the most incredible conversation at that time. And I said, will you please forgive me? And with my trembling voice, I said, well, can I tell you why I did? I'm hurting. I didn't know what to do with it. But I was hurt when you said this. And she just so genuinely apologized to me. And I had never experienced the depth of love and acceptance and trust in a friendship like I have with her now. And like Brené Brown said, vulnerability can be the entryway to love, belonging, empathy. And to this day, she's like my blood sister. I'm the only girl in my family, but she's like my blood sister. And from then on, whenever we would have conflict, I would be the one to initiate with her. And we had just an amazing, those several years together. Let's see. When we have these pain and struggle, we're no different than non-believers. I love telling the story with the people that are in our community. And all the people in our community, none of them are believers. But we have talks like this. I share these stories because none of them, most of them can relate with me in that pain. So who would I be today if I didn't allow God to break my pride and stubbornness, to reveal what's toxic in my heart? You think about the Pharisees, and in some of these stories that you hear about what Jesus says about the Pharisees, I wonder if I would have been just like them if I hadn't been broken. Let's break up into groups, 3, 4. Grab the people around you, and if the let's see. How about we'll break up like down this line, and this group, in your 3 groups of 3 and 4, if let's see, maybe the front 2 rows in the groups that you are, Can you look at Luke 18, 9 to 14? Luke 18, 9 to 14. And if you can make an observation of the characteristics of the people that Jesus is referring to, let's do the observation of unbroken and the broken. So how about this half is looking at the unbroken. Okay? So if the first two rows can take Luke 18, 9 to 14. Let's see. And the next, let's see. Yeah. And then the middle row, if you can take the Matthew 23, 13 to 16. And the last row in your groups of 3 or 4, Matthew 23, 23 to 29. And just make observations of what Jesus is saying or the people that are unbroken in these passages. What are the characteristics? Okay, so in this half of the room, if you can make observations of the broken, what Jesus is saying, how are the broken people responding? What are they like? And if the first two rows can look at Luke 18, 9 to 14, it's the same passage as, yeah. And then if the middle row can look at Luke 7, 38 to 47. And then the last two rows, if you can look at 2 Corinthians 12, 6 to 10. So if you can take about 5 to 10 minutes and look at some of these characteristics. Okay, so you can get in groups of 3 to 4. Well, for time's sake, let's end here and let's get some feedback of your passages. So let's see, Luke 18, on the unbroken side, what were some of the observations you guys made? What were the characteristics of what Jesus said, or what do you guys think? What were they like? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Any other observations? What did you guys notice? Did the question make sense? Was it okay? Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts? They were very confident in their own righteousness. Yeah. It's easier to blame. It's easier to judge others, look down on others, than it is to enter into that really hard place to look at your own mess. Oh, yeah. Okay. How about the broken side? What were your observations in Luke 18 on the broken side? Yeah. Mm. Wow. He praised the other. You think that, do you ever feel like when you enter into that place of looking at your mess, it's so ugly. You don't even want to be with yourself because it's so ugly. But it's amazing that Jesus praised that one. Wow. Huh. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever looked hard and deep at your own mess and you can barely say a prayer like this man. And the only thing that can come out of your mouth is, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, God. And you do that, that big messy cry. And you're like glad no one's there. Yeah. Okay. The next passage, Matthew 23. What were some observations? He says a lot there. Okay. Any thoughts? Yeah. Mm, mm, mm. Mm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how, yeah, we can deny so much to a point where we deceive ourselves to think that we're better than others. Yeah. Were there any other observations? Yeah. It's amazing. They taught about God but didn't love God. They recruited people to a dead religion. Hmm. How about the Luke 7? What were your observations of the broken? Yes. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. What a picture. I don't know if I necessarily see that today, but wow. You're almost like, oh, I wish I knew her and heard her story. Were there any other observations? Yeah. Mm. 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 Yeah. You think about the incredible courage it took for her, the vulnerability, wow, in front of all these religious leaders, going straight up to Jesus, like didn't care what other people thought. And even the Pharisees were scorning her, right? Like, Jesus, if you only knew who's touching you, like, oh, she didn't care. Mm. Okay, how about the next one, Matthew 23? What were some observations of the unbroken? Mm. Wow. So it's similar to that deception. They were deceiving themselves, huh? Wow. Any other thoughts? No? Um, it's just amazing just to look at this list and it's like, oh, it's so us. You ever feel like that? They had this appearance of being clean. I love clean. I need to let go of it more. but but I think a lot of that comes from fear. I noticed there's a fear of mess because it's going to lead to hurt, and I've seen it with my own eyes. I don't want that. Yeah. Okay. Any observations from Second Corinthians? Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Wow. It's hard to experience Jesus' healing, grace, forgiveness if we don't come to that point of admitting our own brokenness, isn't it? Wow. Yeah. This sounds like a workshop on brokenness. And I thought, to be able to connect with the non-believers in our lives, it's going to be hard to connect with them if we don't come to grips with our own brokenness. I had this conversation with one of our staff in Japan, and he's one of our Japanese staff, and he and I were sitting with one of our edger, and the three of us were given the task of what do you call it, helping to make disciples in Japan. And it's hard because we have no believers. So, but we're like, we gotta figure this out first. And Keiichi, one of our Japanese staff, said, "You guys, what do you think is the entryway for them to get to the gospel, to open their heart to Christ?" Well, it's not apologetics. So we're like, brainstorming. No, it's not apologetics. I mean, they've told us straight out. They said, we don't care, Jen, if Jesus stands right in front of us and shows us his scar and says, I'm real. Because they said, we don't care, because what do you have to do with us? I don't know you. We have no connection. So it's not apologetics. Okay, what can it be? What can it be? And then Keiichi says, you know what, Jen? It's brokenness. They know without a shadow of doubt they're broken people, and they will not deny it. There's no expectation to not be broken. There's no like a Christian circle where that's an expectation. To them, it's more of a like a they would laugh if you denied it. So they're totally on like the man who couldn't even look up to heaven. So we started to brainstorm. Oh, if this is it, then God, show us. How do we go there? Like with our people in our community. And man, we had no idea from that day on what God would do next. Because he's like, well, guys, next step is you got to embrace your own brokenness. Like, darn it. And it's been an amazing journey as we've been pondering on that together, very vulnerably with each other. We have one of our girl who she's in our community who graduated, is an alumni, now in the workplace, and very broken. A lot of things are hard for her. Things that you and I take for granted on a day-to-day basis is very difficult for her. There was a lot of trauma in her life. She goes through a lot of panic attack when she's riding the trains, when she's in a big group. Big group like this is very hard for her. But wow, beautiful heart. And she finally got a job that was very hard. It took a long time, like 8 years. What would have taken you, like months after graduation. It took her years. And finally got a job, best environment ever. God is like, oh, so real. gave her this gentle environment, which is hard to find in Japan. But she began to make friends with coworkers. One-on-one is best for her. She loves it. And she began to share very honestly with them. This is what's happened in my life. But you know what? This is what God did for me. They're like, oh, but you know what you just said about what you experienced? You know what? I experienced that too. And it's been painful for me too. And they started sharing openly, honestly. And then she was telling me the other day, she said, Jen, I have these coworkers coming up to me in the middle of working hours. Like, they come up like, Mako, by the way, I'm really struggling. I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling with that. And then she'll say, hey, is it okay? Do you mind? Can I just pray for you? They're like, sure. And we notice none of them say no to being prayed for. And she'll just stop right there in the middle of work, and she'll just pray for them. And she looks up. She goes, I don't know what it is, Jen. Like there's tears coming down their face. But they don't necessarily believe yet, but something about it, the heart of God is touching theirs. Like, wow. She's teaching me. And this is how we live life with our people in the community. We come from our brokenness. We share. Everybody relates to it. No matter where they are spiritually, they all relate to our brokenness. So the next slide, and that's the part with the third heart, is the glimpse of God's heart. And if you ever have time, we're running out of time, but it's Isaiah 57, if you ever have time, read through it. It's incredible how God views our brokenness, our mess. And he's waiting for us to come to that point. And he says in 57:15, I've been living in this verse for the past year, and I'm baffled by it. Because he says, for this is what the high and exalted one says, he who lives forever, whose name is holy. I live in a high and holy place. Like, oh yeah, he's a holy God. Like, oh. But then this is part I don't get it. But also with the one who is contrite and lowly in spirit. Wouldn't you love for God to live where you are, with you, next to you, really close, hugging you? But he can't be there so close unless we're contrite and lowly in spirit. And so now we have this language in our community. We're like, with our team, our staff team, like, hey, so-and-so, God is really breaking their heart. They're like, oh, they're close. When we sense that they are embracing their brokenness, we're like, oh, they're close to God, getting closer to God's heart. I want to end with this quote. In the next slide, or I can't believe, I think it's in the next slide. And it says this, by Chuck Swindoll, and he says, you want to mess up the minds of your children? Here's how, guaranteed. Rear them in a legalistic, tight context of external religion, where performance is more important than reality. Fake your faith, sneak around, and pretend your spirituality. Train your children to do the same. Embrace a long list of do's and don'ts publicly, but hypocritically. Practice them privately, yet never own up to the fact that it's hypocrisy. Act one way, but live another, and you can count on it. Emotional, spiritual damage will occur. And this is something we do not want to do within our own, wherever God is using you, with the dorm mates, the coworkers, in your part-time job or in your full-time job. And that's the challenge for you and I. Yeah, that we would embrace our brokenness and that we would know that the only difference between them and us is that we're shepherded. So thank you.